So hello and welcome to another video in my series of interviews with experts. I'm Frederick Dunn, and today my guest is Eugene Mackovic. Mr. Mackovic is the editor of the American Bee Journal. This publication has been an excellent source of information about beekeeping since 1861. I invite you to sit back and enjoy learning a little bit about the people behind this well-known periodical. Here's Eugene.
So I'm Eugene Mackovic. I am editor of American Bee Journal for the last 4 years. I'm a 27-year beekeeper, third generation. I live in Foley, Missouri, or outside Foley, Missouri, which is a little town of 161, about an hour northwest of St. Louis. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, well, I'm glad to have you too, Eugene, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me. And for those who are watching, this is also going to be a podcast on Podbean under The Way to Bee. And there'll be links down in the video description for more information about the American Bee Journal. So what I want to know, first of all, since you mentioned your beekeeping, so rather than talk about the Bee Journal right away and your position there, let's talk a little bit about how you got started with bees and what your experience was like.
Okay. Well, I actually grew up with bees. Oddly enough, I had we had bees in the yard. I grew up on a dairy farm in central Wisconsin. My dad always had 4, 5, 6 beehives out in the yard. I never really paid that much attention. I thought they were kind of cool. I mean, it was something my dad kind of did on his own. He didn't. Well, he had 10 kids and was so busy just trying to keep food in all our mouths. I think beekeeping was kind of his thing. He did kind of his quiet time. He did that on his own. He'd be happy to talk about it if you asked him, but I never really asked him that much. And it wasn't until later on, after I'd been down in Missouri for a while, he got out of beekeeping. He was getting up in years, had some poor health, had had a kidney transplant, and then the mites finally came along and drove him out. And prior to that, whenever I would drive up to Wisconsin, I'd bring some honey back. You know, I'd save anything from mason jars to peanut butter containers or whatever, and I'd go up and he would have a couple of cans of those 10-gallon milk cans, the old metal milk cans that he would put honey in, and they would be all crystallized. And I'd take an ice cream scoop, and take out some honey and thanks, and ended up taking them back home. Well, when he got out of it wasn't the same going to the grocery store and buying honey. So I called my dad and I started asking him questions and found out that his dad had been a beekeeper too, which I never known. I mean, my grandparents had come over from Slovenia around the turn of the last century, and he'd been a beekeeper over there. And my dad had picked this up. His dad had gotten out of it for ill health as he was getting up in years, and the beehives were just sitting there. And when Dad took over the farm in 41, when his next older brother went off to fight in the war, he got the beehives too and put some bees back in them. And he was a beekeeper the rest of his life and up until the last few years. But the neat thing about it was I was number 8 of 10 kids. Never really had a relationship with my dad to any degree until I started expressing an interest in bees, and I was the first one to do so. And it really brought us together, established that relationship the last few years of his life, which was really a cool thing. So I've been doing this for 27 years now, just always been a hobbyist. I bounce around that dozen hive or so range, and I took a class, a workshop. I took a workshop at the Jefferson County Beekeepers, which you know where that is, about an hour south or something of St. Louis, and joined the Eastern Missouri Beekeepers at the time, and I've been doing this ever since.
So the question I have, first of all, do you have any of those jugs still? Those big milk jugs?
No. Every now and then I run across one at a thrift shop or something. They're usually all rusty and and everything. But
When you go to Vermont, everybody's got one on their porch as a planter.
yeah,
But yeah, that would have been really heavy, full of honey. Think about
yeah.
that.
And you know what? He
Yeah.
had them up at the top of up at the top on the second floor upstairs. He'd had lugged them up to the top of the stairs. I can't imagine why he did that. He just thought that was a good spot for him, I guess. But I wouldn't want to do
Now,
that.
what kind of equipment did he have left over that you found useful when you took up beekeeping?
Um, he had an old galvanized four frame hand crank extractor from it was an old date hand extractor from the 40s, which is I picked that up and I actually used that for several years. I kept having to solder it and get some food grade solder and solder leaks in the bottom. And then when I went to try and but I went to do a food grade epoxy on the inside, I was trying to get the spigot off on the out on the bottom, and it was so rusted I actually broke it out the side and said, "Oh, I got to go get time to graduate to a stainless steel, a newer a newer date
Yeah.
ant."
And I've seen
And
those old galvanized steel extractors, and yeah, you're right. They get a lot of oxidation on them and everything else too, so they're a high
yeah.
maintenance setup.
But other
But
than that, it was just a few, a few hive bodies and things like that to get me started.
yeah, and you said that mites drove him out. Like, what did you try? What happened?
I just don't. At that point, he wasn't really trying anything. I don't think that
Okay.
he'd have for the last several years. He had the hives out there, and they'd die in the winter, and swarms would move into a couple of them in the spring. And he had
Hmm.
an Amish beekeeper down the road. I think that's where they were primarily coming from, and then they would last the season, and then they die out again. And he just basically just, I'm just going to put these things out in the shed somewhere and be done with it.
So was your primary incentive for keeping bees yourself? Was it the honey or some of the product they were producing? What did you want out?
Um, yeah, I guess it was the honey primarily, and then once I got into it and started learning more about it, it was just this whole addiction thing. You know
Hmm.
how it is.
Hmm.
It just became, it just took over my life, and of course, I had a real job. I was in the printing industry
Hmm.
and did that on the side, and you can only do so much on the side and keep up with it. But
Hmm.
I've always I think I had as many as 19 or 20 for a couple of years when I was in
Hmm.
Kirkwood, but didn't really have time to keep up with them. And I just kind of dropped back to this. I got 10 right now.
So when you say it becomes an addiction, what about the bees was addictive?
Oh, just the constant learning experience is the neatest thing about it. It's like every day you're going to college, and only you don't have exams, unless you count that overwintering thing.
Hmm.
But it's just there's always something new to learn,
Hmm.
and for everything that you learn, what is that they say? You open a door and three more doors open. I mean,
Hmm.
it's something that's never ending, and it's just so fascinating.
Yeah,
And
the more you learn, the more you want to know.
yeah, and
So
like a lot of beekeepers don't make the mistake of asking me about my bees because you'll have trouble getting away from me after that.
yeah, yeah. Was there somebody working with you on your bees, or was it a solitary thing?
There was not. I jumped into it, and my my wife at the time wasn't thrilled with the idea, and she wasn't interested in it. So it was just it was just me, and I joined the local club, but they didn't really have a organized mentoring program of any
Mhm.
sort, which most clubs really don't. This is something we've really been working on and have some success with the last several years at the club I'm in now, Three
Mhm.
Rivers in St. Peters, Missouri. But that's the exception. It's very difficult to do that, and but so it was kind of like you go to the meetings, you ask one of the old timers what happened, why you have the problem that you're having, and that
Mhm.
sort of thing, and you kind of learn as you go.
So would you say that was your source? What other source of information did you have when you wanted to learn
Oh
more?
well, I subscribed to both of the magazines. I joined that local club. I also joined the state organization. You know, when I first joined this club, their membership form had a series of check boxes. They had your local club membership, your state membership, you could check a box to subscribe to American Bee Journal, one for bee culture. There was this other one called the Speedy Bee. I don't know if you were around when that thing was around for a few years. It was
The
it was kind of
Speedy
a
Bee.
it was called the Speedy Bee. It was more of a little, it was on newsprint material. It was
Hmm.
like a little folded thing with 12 pages or something, like a miniature newspaper thing that came out. I think it was quarterly, but it didn't last all that long I don't know when it started, but wasn't there much longer after I was around. But you had all these check boxes, and you write the check to the local club, and then they would mail payment to these various places. And
Mhm.
so I subscribed. It was funny because I was asking around for people to asking, what's the difference between these two main magazines and which one's better, and I didn't really get a clear consensus on which one was better, but the
Mhm.
difference, people seemed to think that ABJ was geared toward, was more scientific,
Mhm.
more in depth, geared toward the commercial beekeepers, where
Mhm.
bee culture was for beginners and hobbyists. And there
Mhm.
was something to that. They've
Mhm.
come closer together over the years. But I decided, what, I'll subscribe to one of these the first year. Next year I'll try the other one, and then I'll choose. I've gotten them both ever since. Because I
Yeah,
tell people all the time they're both good magazines.
yeah, I subscribe to both as well. And it's interesting you have this background in printing because another one of your um, from the editor segments involved the cost of using a specific font.
Oh, yeah.
You guys were kind of having to make a decision about that with something beekeepers aren't going to think about what it takes to run a magazine and the idea that fonts may cost money or are licensed and things like that. Do you remember that
Yeah.
particular? Uh,
Yeah, this was just, it was just kind of I just got a kick out of the whole idea that Adobe, which we lay the magazine out in InDesign, which is part of the Adobe Creative
okay.
Suite, along with
Yeah.
Illustrator and Photoshop and this and that. And well, they came along and said, they started popping up a thing where you jump into InDesign. We used the font that we use. It popped up and said this font will no longer be supported after January 1st, 2023. It was
What?
Palatino, which is a fairly common font. It's like, how can a font not be supported? I don't know, So I just
Yeah.
kind of made a joke about what that means, because I can't imagine what it is about a font that would not be supported. I mean, it's type, I don't know. But as it happened, we ended up there's more than one version of Palatino, and we found another one that's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Very little difference between the two, and we just went to that.
So you're going along and you're in the industry, and somehow the American Bee Journal editor position opens up and you apply for it. How does that come about?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mentioned I joined the local and the state organizations, and got a little bit involved in the local one, helping out with this and that. And then the Missouri State Beekeepers newsletter came out, and that was kind of it was a once in a while affair. I mean, it was not they came out and they said, we need a newsletter editor. The guy that we had to leave, and I think it was the president's wife was taking it over for the short term, and we need somebody. And I said, you know what? I got I got photography and writing experience, and I'm in the printing industry, getting into the graphics end of it. This will be a good way to improve my own skills and help the organization. So I jumped in to this thing and took it over, and within pretty short order turned it into something. I mean, the bar was pretty low. I turned it around from something that looked like a beekeeper did, into something a little bit more professional, and and they were very appreciative. They gave me Beekeeper of the Year, and I got stuck with the job for 11 years. And about the
11
last
years.
3, I was trying to get out of it. But the thing was,
Yeah.
I doing this job. I was kind of forced to go to these twice annual conferences that the state had, where we would bring in, big name speakers from all over the country, and I was forced to attend those and take copious notes and report back to our membership. So I learned a ton about beekeeping and bees, and I got to meet these speakers, and I would communicate with them. I would always, I'd send them an email and get their bio information for the newsletter, and then I put them on my email list because I included an option for you could either get the mailed copy or a PDF and in
Mhm.
color, and so I got had communicated with a few of these speakers, some of whom now write for me, and
Mhm.
I also since I put the thing on a regular schedule and made it a little bit more presentable, we were able to sell advertising for it and make it pay for itself. Well, among those advertisers were Bee Culture Magazine and ABJ/Date Ant, and so I had communication with the two of those editors too, and they would also pick up stories from me now and then. They'd contact me and say, "Hey, I like this story you had in your newsletter. Do you mind if I print it in the magazine?" I actually had more of those in Bee Culture than I did in ABJ, but
Hmm.
apparently they got lower standards over there at Bee Culture. I don't know,
Yeah.
but that was a neat thing, And then another thing about going to those conferences was I got to know a lot of the regular vendors who were there, including the Danan family. So,
Mhm.
so those contacts ended up meaning something later on. And I always kind of thought, I was enjoying what I was doing. And I always kind of thought, both of these editors are getting up a little bit in years and they're going to be retiring one of these years. And when that happens, one of those jobs comes open, I'm going to send in an application, assuming they advertise it and see what happens. Well, the ABJ job came up and I missed it. They ran an ad in the journal and I didn't see it. And I emailed Joe Graham, the old editor, one day about something, and I got kind of an out of office type response saying, "I'm retired. See Kirsten Trainer." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Dang it, how did that happen?" So
Yeah.
about a year later, I was at one of these Missouri conferences, which I was no longer involved in the newsletter at that time for for the last year or two before that, and ran into Gabe Dayant, who was a guy that I'd run into a bunch of times at these things, and I was chatting. I had to. I I was telling people my date and smoker got me the ABJ job because I had backed over my old date and smoker that I had for about 15 years, backed over it in my driveway, and had to run out and buy one of these cheap farm store ones, and I hated it. And about a month later, this conference came up, and so I went there. I immediately went back to the vendor area, found the date and booth, and bought a new smoker and struck up a conversation with Gabe, and I asked him how the newsletter or how the magazine editor was going and all that kind of thing, and we had a little chat, and I started to walk away, and I turned around and I said, "You know what? I wish I'd known that job was coming open. I always kind of thought I'd put in for it." And he looked at me and he said, "I wish I had known you were interested. We actually, your name came up and we didn't think you were interested. I guess because I hadn't applied for it." Well, about 2 weeks later, Kirsten stepped down. She put in her resignation, and Gabe gave me a call and said, "Why don't you come see us?" And
Mhm.
they hired me. So it was just the strangest thing the way it worked out. But all of that is a very long way
That's
of telling you how
yeah.
everything kind of works together
Yeah.
sometimes to make
I
things
actually
happen.
love the whole list of happenstance that brought you there, breaking your your smoker, running over it and going to get another one and running into the right people at the right time. Going to these conventions, and you mentioned that you kind of established relationships with people that later became contributors for you. Who was a real standout? Somebody that you just kind of met for the first time and you just overly impressed by? I realize that this kind of creates others that were not the standout, but just one good story of somebody who ran into at one of these conferences.
The best, really the biggest standout just in terms of proximity is Randy Oliver, because when Randy came and spoke, he needed a ride from the airport, and somebody put out an email and said somebody needs to pick up Randy at the St. Louis airport, drive him out to the conference, which was in Lake St. Louis that year, and about 3 hour drive from St. Louis, and so my wife and I were going out there, and so I said I left work and went and picked him up and brought him back and picked up my wife and drove him out. So we had 3 hours of car time with him both ways on the way out, and a couple days coming back. So we had a lot of talk time, and what the funny thing about that one was too is I picked up Randy. He came walking out the door, and I was there in the pickup area. He came walking out with this little bitty laptop bag, and I said, "Okay, so we're going to go pick up your bag." He said, "No, this is it." So really, he said, "Yeah, I travel light." So he must have had a t-shirt and a pair of underwear in there or something. I don't know with his laptop,
Yeah.
but he said, "Yeah, I travel light." So
Well, I
I
think
thought that was kind of funny.
his uniform is pretty much a t-shirt and shorts, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
sandals.
Yeah, no matter where he goes. Well, that's what a great opportunity to have. Did you talk the whole time, or was there, I mean, there must have been some silence, but
If
what
you've
an
ever
opportunity.
if you
Yeah.
ever chatted with Randy, he talked
Yeah.
a lot more than we did,
Yeah.
but it
Got a
was
lot to
very,
say. Yeah.
yeah.
What a great opportunity. I love that story. So then talk about what it was like getting going as the editor of the American Bee Journal. What was your first order of business when you got there?
Well, it was the I was hired first part of November, and I just hit 4 years, and came in. Dr. Trainer had left rather suddenly. I mean, and 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 so Joe Graham was who lived in the area, came out of retirement to do the January 19 issue.
Mhm.
So I called. So they asked me, "Hey, come in, start the week after." I put in 2 weeks' notice at the printing company where I was working, and started the week after Thanksgiving, and started by spending a week with Joe, working on finishing up this January issue. And so Joe called me about a week prior to that and said, "Hey, welcome aboard," and all this, and we were chatting, and he said, "By the way, when I decided to step down, you were the first person I thought of, but I thought you weren't interested." It's like, yeah, I was like, would it have killed someone to give me a call or something? But
Yeah.
anyway, I spent a week with him. Work basically, he was doing his job and telling me what his process was, and the last thing was he put the day before this was going to go to the printer. Susan, who does the layout, printed out the whole thing for Joe to look at, and I flipped open the top of it, and it said editor Eugene Makovic, and I said, "Whoa, wait a minute, what's up with this?" And Joe said, "Well, we thought it'd be kind of weird to go back to me as for 1 month and then go to you. So I told Susan, okay, why don't you print out another copy of this? I want to see what I'm signing off on." And so I went through and took it back to the hotel room and made a few little last minute edits of my own, but nothing nothing consequential. But then the next I just kind of jumped in after that and
Mhm.
started talking to writers, and I was very fortunate to have a very good stable of columnists and other regular writers, some of whom I'd met before, but majority of whom really didn't know who the heck I was. I mean, I outside of Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, not a lot of people were familiar with me. They'd maybe
Mhm.
seen my name a couple times because I'd had an article here and there, but
Mhm.
I had a little bit of I don't know if you'd call it trepidation, but a little concern about how I'd be accepted as a no as an unknown quantity, but it went really well. I've established really good relationships with these writers over the years, and we we banter back and forth, and I'm a fairly hands-on editor. I mean, I you send me something to go in the magazine and I accept it, I'm gonna make my edits and I'm gonna send it back to you and say these are my edits, and give you the opportunity to fight about it if you want to. And most
Well,
for the most case, it's minor things, but
mhm.
I like I said, I got a pretty good relationship with people. Most people, I've got the people that say, yeah, whatever. And you got the people that say, oh, thanks for catching that. There's a couple people who are as nitpicky as I am. They come in and they say, hey, I put that comma there for a reason or whatever. And,
Mhm.
we work it out. It's this, I don't ever get into fights with anybody,
Yeah.
but it's a good process. And I always, before we go to press, when we lay that article out, I send them that to look at as well. And
Mhm.
I just think, having been on the other side of this, I know that writers don't like surprises, and
Mhm.
there's nothing like sending somebody an article and having it come back and the first paragraph's changed around where it says something not quite what you meant, or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. And I've
Mhm.
never had that problem with either of the B magazines, but I've had that issue earlier, with the other occasional things I've written, and I just like to avoid that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And people tend to appreciate that.
Yeah. Now in our minds, maybe we're thinking you're walking into an office and, in back in the day, there were typewriters everywhere and everybody had a cubicle or a small office and the editor walked in and visited everybody to see how they were making progress. But today, I mean, I just imagine that most people are remotely working and submitting their stuff. So what kind of staff is there? When you say I go to the office, what kind of staff are we talking about? What's the environment like?
Well, to begin with, I'm sitting in my office now. I'm
Okay.
looking out into my backyard.
Yeah.
I have a home office. I spend a couple days a month and at Datant. Datant is based. They're in Hamilton, Illinois. They're about 100. They're 125 miles from my door. So I drive up there through farmland. It's a beautiful drive. I got no traffic. I do this. I make a day trip twice a month, and
Mhm.
that's great. And that was one of the real selling points for it too. I mean, not that I would have to be, not like you needed a hard sell for me to take this job, but
Mhm.
that was a pretty cool thing when we talked, when they called me about it. They said, "Now we wouldn't need you to move to Hamilton. It'd be great if you did, but we'd just like to see you on a regular basis." So that's what we settled on, was a couple days a month, and it varies, but that's for the most part.
Mhm.
I'm up there the last day before we go to print, and then somewhere during the middle of the month, I'm up there. So I'm basically doing everything via online, via Dropbox and email.
Yeah.
Trade,
Okay.
trade files back and forth and scan edits and things like that.
Yeah.
It
And
works pretty
Dropbox
well.
is fantastic, by the way.
Yeah. Now
So,
when I when I met Joe Graham a few years ago, the first time I met him in person, I asked him, I said, "You've been here quite a while, haven't you?" He said, "Yeah, you know what? I graduated from journalism school. I answered an ad in the paper. I've been here ever since." Didn't know the first thing about bees or beekeeping at the time,
yeah.
which just floored me. But Joe, he took over in '74 and just really modernized the magazine, made it a whole lot more professional. And let me turn on a light here. It's starting to get dark in this.
Yeah.
outside lights going away. Okay.
Hmm.
But yeah, he really modernized the magazine, made it very professional, and it's and that really is the his professionalism and just the quality materials and everything is the reason,
Mhm.
one of the reasons that this has been my favorite magazine for a few years. Like I say, I get both of them. I read them both cover to cover,
Mhm.
and they're good magazines. But I really like the job that he did with
Mhm.
it. But when he took it over, it was still a black and white magazine. The cover was two colors, and then it was. I was giving a talk on this last week. It was 1991 that they finally went to a four color, full color, what we call four color process on the cover only. And then in 2001, I believe it was when they went full color throughout. And B Culture did the same year. That it finally got to where the expense came down enough that magazines of our size could afford to do that.
Mhm.
But they were all, when he took over, it was still, the layout was still, was paste up. You'd print out, and I did this back in college. You print out a strip of a column on a
Mhm.
typesetter, and you'd paste it up on a board. You'd run it through this wax machine, and it would wax the back, and you'd paste that column down, and you could pick it up and move it if you wanted to move things around. And you
Mhm.
did that with ads and all these kind of things, and you took this whole stack of boards to the printer, and now,
Mhm.
yeah, now you do it everything through software and emails, and
Is that where did they have something like stripping or strippers? Like they would strip the stuff off it?
yeah, that was um that was more for like the plates and
Okay.
negatives is where that
Okay.
term came in.
That's
But
interesting.
yeah,
That is all. Where is it physically printed?
as of now, it's in one of the it's in a Madison suburb up in Wisconsin where the actual plant is that prints it.
So do they print a proof and you have to go and look everything over, or do they just
They
go with it?
we proof it online, so we send them a high res PDF,
Yeah.
and then they put it into their proofing system where it shows all the crops and the corners and everything, and
Mhm.
we flip through that and make sure nothing got out of whack in the transition, and then we approve that proof. Excuse me, we approve that proof online,
Mhm.
and then they print it, and they do what's called co-mailing, where it goes to various shipping points throughout the country and mails, so everybody in every part of the country is, it's designed so most of us will get that in the mail up around the same time, whether you live
Mhm.
in Washington State or Tennessee.
Yeah. So as far as so in 1991 they went to that four color process you said or whatever.
On the
As
Yeah, the cover.
as far as the paper it's printed on and like the cover and things like that, has that changed since then at all? The weight of the paper or the kind of stock?
Oh yeah, it's a big difference from when he started
Yeah.
and when I came in. I mean,
Mhm.
he really upped the quality of the paper, the materials, and everything. I mean, it was almost, back in the 70s, that material was not much of higher grade than like newsprint. Like,
Mhm.
it was whiter, but it was thinner and uncoated stock, because everything was just in black and white. And now, of course, it's more important to have some kind of coating on that material so those pictures look nice.
Mhm.
And I like that he did if you look at the cover, you see that high gloss. That's called a UV gloss. It's a coating that is applied after the fact. Um, UV inks are there. It's a clear liquid that goes down, and
Mhm.
it's cured under ultraviolet light, and it gives it that hard surface. And there are different
Huh.
different types of UV coating, and you can do that. The actual inks can be done UV too. These are
Yeah.
not, but that coating is made for two reasons. One, it gives that scuff resistance, but it also just makes that high gloss just makes that image pop on there.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So my next question is the people, how do you choose the people that are going to do features, the ones that show up every month? How do you decide who are those contributors and how did you pick them?
We have the regular contributors, most of whom were there. Those people on the left hand, those columnists were
Hmm.
most of them were around when I started, and then a few of the regular contributors like a Peter Borst or Mia McNeil. Some of those people have been around off and on over the years. Peter has pretty much gone to every month since I came in. We have
Hmm.
a good working relationship, and he really likes writing for us, and that's great because I love his writing.
Hmm.
And then we've got the people that just send me something. I mean, we've people will send me something out of the blue, and if I like it, I will print it, and and if I don't, I won't. And really, the one of the toughest things about my job is saying no to people. People send me an article, they've done put a lot of work into it, and I have to go back to them and say it's just not. I don't come out and say, hey, sorry, it's just not up to our standards. I'll just, tell them it's not what we're interested in or whatever. But
Yeah.
um, and then there are people that I do occasionally go out to someone and say, hey, I would really like to see an article about this. Sometimes it's somebody I've used, sometimes it's somebody out of the blue, like maybe somebody that I've seen at a conference, or I see some work that they did, and I'll approach them and ask them to write about something. and
Mhm.
and there's always a risk there if it's something that you have if it's someone that you haven't seen in print,
Mhm.
whether
Yeah.
because you're under a little bit more pressure to accept that, even if it requires a lot of work. And
Yeah.
there are cases where people send me things that are just not well written,
Mhm.
and there are times when I will go ahead and spend a lot of time helping them, redo it and whatever. And I will do that either because it's a subject that I really want in the magazine, or it's a person that I really it's good for the magazine to have
Mhm.
that reputation in the magazine, that it's worth my while to spend, sometimes as much time on my end as they did on their end to
Yeah.
make that article workable.
And try to keep the facts intact, but in some way
That
make them
too, yeah.
more accurate.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah, because I do
what do
get
you do
I
when you, yeah, when you get an article that could be factually so off base? What's your approach to that?
if it's just the article itself is just that much out there, then
Yeah.
it's easier to just say no. It's I'm not going to run this, and a lot of times, people will come back and say, well, why? And I'll
Yeah.
mention, hey, this is not the case, and you do occasionally run into the situation where people will argue back and forth and say, well, you're just not open to new ideas or whatever, and that gets uncomfortable. But then,
Mhm.
that's part of my job, and that's the
Yeah.
reason
Yeah.
I don't do it for free, because
Yeah.
I
No,
do
I
have to
mean
work sometimes.
that's one of the unfortunate actually parts of being the editor, but you have to represent the magazine and preserve it. So
Yeah.
um that's
But
very
I'm also
interesting.
fortunate enough that I know I've got enough people that I know who are competent and know a lot more than I do, that I can
Mhm.
approach somebody and say, hey, somebody sent me this, read this paragraph and tell me if that makes sense to you.
Mhm.
And sometimes it does. Sometimes they say, yes, that is actually true, that the bees do this in these circumstances.
Mhm.
And that's another one of the great things about my job. I mean, every month I have a bunch of really smart people send me articles about bees, and I have to read them. and
Mhm.
and if I'm publishing them, I have to read them 2 or 3 times, and
Mhm.
and I also have to read the competition. So I really have learned so much in in doing this job. I mean, I
Mhm.
feel like I feel like my 27 years now of beekeeping gave me a decent base of knowledge, but there's a lot that I don't know and that other people know, and I've more than willing to go ask somebody if I'm unsure about something.
I would think that would be one of the real exciting parts of being the editor for the ABJ, is that often you'll be the first maybe to read some information that is extremely valuable, and you're on the leading edge of getting that input. So can you
Yeah.
give me an example of an article that was submitted or written that was just overwhelmingly supported by your readership, that you got a really great response on in the 4 years that you've been there?
I don't know. There've been a few of them. I always the first person that comes to mind is Randy Oliver because he's got
Mhm.
such a following,
Sure.
and I always hear people at conferences. That seems to be the most person that comes up most often. Say, "Oh yeah, well I read first thing I read is Randy Oliver. He's got this, this his research on whatever, whether it's the oxalic acid, the extended release thing he's doing now, and that and." But I don't know that I can't really pinpoint anything offhand that stands off above all the rest. But I do get I love it when I get people that send me emails, and we have a letters to the editor section,
Yep.
but most of the emails that people send me, in many cases I would like to put them in as a letter to the editor, but they no, this is just for personal, personal communication. I just wanted to say how much I love, like Mia McNeil's article about the beekeepers over in Ukraine a couple months ago that struck a chord with some
Mhm.
people. I got a few responses about that,
Mhm.
and seems like Rusty Burlew always gets responses from people. Got a real, she's just a very good writer, and she strikes a chord with people.
And she's been doing that a long time. She has her own website as well that's pretty
Yeah,
effective too, right?
yeah,
Yeah, and I think you're right. Randy Oliver, everybody follows his research because it's actionable. Everything, the things he's talking about are things people are waiting to implement in their backyard beekeeping or even in their commercial operations. Often they jump the gun, and whatever he's researching, they go ahead and act on that
yeah,
before it's finalized. And
yeah.
but yeah, the idea of the science behind it just pushes that all. So, how many subscribers are there right now?
We've got around 15,000
Mhm.
before. I think that's well, it's between 14 and 15. About 1,500 of those are digital subscribers,
Okay,
and the rest are print subscribers.
yeah. So now I personally like to have the physical magazine, so I hope
Yeah,
that
I do
never
that too.
goes away, to be honest. So because I like just have it in hand and be by the fireplace or whatever. I don't want to look at another illuminated screen.
Yeah.
But so is that like, are they, do they come out like as a Kindle pub? Is so when you say it's a
Um,
PDF, how do they look at it?
the host of it is an outfit called Blue Toad, and you get a link and you click on there, and you can just there's arrows you can click to page, to turn the pages on it.
Yeah.
You can zoom in if you want. You can download the whole thing as a PDF if you want, and
Hmm.
then just have it. But I'm with you. I can certainly read it like that, but
Yeah.
I would rather have that physical thing. I look at a screen all day as it is. If I want to read something, I prefer to read it in hard copy if possible.
And you mentioned that people can download and things like that. What about copyright? Like if somebody wants to cycle it back to their website, or if people want to use components of the digital version in a YouTube or in some other, in some presentation that they're giving, is that permitted? Do they have to contact you? How does that work?
The the copyright thing, it states that we have 60-day digital rights. So we talk about this with authors all the time. People say, "Hey, well, I would like to post this to my website or whatever," or to my group or something. We have 60-day digital rights, meaning you can't reproduce it. You can't spread it far and wide until, if it's the November issue, till January 1st. Um, if you're, we'll have an author will say, "Hey, I'm so excited that you published my article. Do you mind if I share it to my local club?" I say, "Well, the local club is fine. Don't put it on Facebook and that
Mm,
where it can be shared far and wide.
mm.
Just hold off 60 days before you do that." But otherwise, if you, when you do that, we just need you to credit us for it, and if somebody else asks to use something, they have to credit the author, they have to credit the magazine.
Okay. That's right, because there is a YouTube channel, by the way, where they read articles from the American Bee Journal going back to the 1800s, 1900s.
Wow, that's neat.
He has like 10 subscribers, which I haven't, because I did a lot of looking around. I checked on the number one gripes, the list of complaints about the American Bee Journal, and tried to find out what people were happy about, what they questioned, why they choose one over the other. But the consensus is really that people want them both.
So where
So
was I on that list of complaints? The number one list
you
of gripes.
personally, or not you personally, it's just that it's about content. But I can tell you what one of the frequently posted complaints is, what is going on with the American Bee Journal's page numbering system? Because like right here, I'm looking at page 1199. So people don't seem to understand why it's not just 1 through 90 or however many pages are in the magazine. What is the answer to that?
So it's a volume. It's January through December. So
Okay.
you get into December and we're talking page 1300 and something or whatever. It usually ends up as 1400, give or take, somewhere between like 1350 and 1400 pages. We average about 116 pages an issue, and it
So
varies
on
by
so
varies month to month.
The January issue that's about to come out will start with page 1.
Yep, yep.
Oh, people are gonna think I'm so smart when I know that coming out. So it's almost like a Julian calendar, only it's pages in the book, pages in the volume.
Yeah, and I think this used to be a more common thing, and I think the reason for it is um, this we're starting volume 163 now, and it used to be a volume was actually bound at the end of the year into a volume. So
Mhm.
we go, you go up, I go up to Data Ant, I look in the Data Ant library. We've got all these old volumes there, and it's an actual book. It's all bound
Okay.
together. You flip through this book.
Yeah, I used to see that with
So
National Geographic, that they would have those annual volumes.
yeah,
So this is so that habit. Could you buy an annual volume printed?
I don't know. I'm guessing not. I don't
Okay.
think we have volumes per se for sale.
Okay.
We've got magazines, and we you can go buy back issues. I don't know if they go all the way back, but
Mm.
they're we always print a bunch extra because people do come back and say, "Hey, I want to." I looked up an article from 1968, and I buy that volume, and we do sell them.
So if it's volume
The
one,
older they are, the more expensive they are because they get more rare.
yeah. So volume 163 is at 163 years.
Yes,
That's
yeah, we started in 1861.
wow. Now the profile picture that you sent that I will have used on the thumbnail for this interview, are you at their library for that? What's the library
Yeah,
that you're standing in?
yeah, I'm standing in the corner of what is the ABJ library, which
Okay.
is my office when I'm up there. So I'm standing there, and in the background you can see some books. There's a smoker or
Yeah.
something, and a couple
Yep.
other old tools on the shelf. We've got a row of all around the room. We've got a row of smokers that goes all the way around, a bunch of different designs of smokers
Is
from over the years.
any of that open to the public?
Only if we've got something going on, they'll run tours, not on a normal basis. I don't think you
So
can
there's
just
no
come in.
like museum or
Not
like
really.
public access area?
Not really. When you walk the date ant, there is a like a very there's a small showroom with a few of the extractors and showing you different kinds of the hives and frames and various things that they sell, but there's not like it's not a big fancy showroom. You can go up there and you can walk in there and place an order and they'll
Mhm.
show you samples and things like that. But
So people that are listening or watching right now, what's their best way to get a subscription? What's going to be the best price for them?
so the best price is if you belong to a beekeeping organization,
Okay.
you call the office and they will take give them your information and say, no, by the way, I belong to the Kentucky State Beekeepers Association. Give me the club discount, which is 15%.
And
So
that's 15% forever, every year.
yeah,
And we already know it's available as a digital. And what's the biggest earning source for the publication? Is it advertisers, subscribers? What is it?
I don't know for sure. I'm thinking it might be ads, but I don't know for sure. The funny thing is, I have no I I'm not in the business end of it, so I
Okay.
don't have a lot to go by here. The funny thing is when I started there, I asked the question. I said, "So," because this is ABJ is published by Data, okay,
Mhm.
and I'm the only full-time American Bee Journal employee. So
Oh, okay.
there are three other people that are listed on the masthead, Susan and Diane. Susan does layout, Diane handles subscriptions and a lot of other stuff behind the scenes things, and Marta handles the advertising. But all of them work for Data and they do other things. So they do ABJ work when it needs done, and otherwise they're doing. So so I asked the question when I started, if the journal were to be spun off as its own entity, would we be making money?
Mhm.
Nobody could tell me. maybe
What?
they maybe they didn't want to tell me. I don't know, but I think things are so intertwined. There's no,
Yeah.
probably be difficult to determine.
So the Data Press, do they publish books as well and things like that? Data
Yeah,
publications?
yes, there are a few books in our catalog that are published by Dadant. Boy, the um, basic shoot, I'm trying to think of the one that Delaplane wrote.
Pete
Um,
Delaplane, University of Georgia.
yeah, so we've got, well, for example, the classroom, which is a collection of classroom articles from Jerry Hayes over the years. That's published by Data. There are a few other books that are published by Data
Okay.
that are in the Data catalog.
I'm running out of it. Have you physically met everybody that contributes there? Like, have you sat down and had coffee with Rusty?
I have not. Rusty lives way up in the Northwest. Actually, she just moved to North Dakota or South Dakota a couple months ago,
Yeah.
but no, I've never run into her
There's no
anywhere.
like
I've met a
annual
few of
gathering or
them.
something.
Yeah, I've met a handful of them. I mean, or a few of them. I've met Peter Boris. I met him at a conference actually where he spoke in Missouri. I've met Mia McNeil up at Ipamondia. I met a couple other people. Um, Allie McAfee, I've met a couple times. Megan Milbrath, which is a really great thing, when you can actually sit down and
Mhm.
talk to some of these people. But yeah, I've given going through all this stuff via internet, and of course, it was that way years ago too. Only people were sending you hard copies of things. So yeah, there's a few people that I've never met. Charles Linder, I've met. I'm just looking through the last issue. but a lot of them I've never met in person, but can
Mhm.
correspond with on a regular basis, and
Mhm.
it's just a matter of getting in, both attending the same conferences at the same time.
Who would you like to meet that you haven't yet?
Besides like the Jesus and Albert
Yeah.
Einstein that most people answer.
Yeah, beyond the even the contributors, if there's somebody in beekeeping that you or a bee researcher or a scientist, who would you like to come across and have a conversation with?
I was another one that comes to mind is Samuel Ramsey.
Samuel Rand.
I was privileged to meet him at a conference a couple of years ago, and um, but oh, and Jim too. I met at a conference last year where we both spoke, and and he offered to do some writing for me, so I put him on. We've got a beginning beekeeper conference or column that I like to switch off year by year.
Mhm.
Everybody's got a different perspective on things, so I like people to get beginners, especially to get different perspectives. So I switch that off every year. Dewey Karen was the previous one. I met him a few times,
Mhm.
um, but so what was it? Oh, who would I like to meet? Boy, I don't know. I really would like to meet Rusty Burley. She and I have a really
Yeah.
good banter back and forth on a regular basis. She's a lot of fun.
I heard that she's hard to get a hold of. Because
Oh,
that's just what I hear. Anyway, because there's a lot of people I'd like to interview for what we're doing right now, or people I want to talk
yeah.
to. But
And
Sam,
Jamie Ellis is fun too. Have you ever met Jamie?
yeah, I've not met him in person now.
Yeah,
He makes the rounds.
I've not talked to him in person since I took this job, but I'd met him at a couple conferences before.
Mhm.
He's funny. He's a good speaker. He's
Yep.
got a good sense of humor.
Yep. And he goes to the National Honey Show there overseas and gives presentations there. I know he makes the rounds a lot. In fact, he encouraged a young bee researcher that I recently interviewed, a trio that because they have a bee lab or something down at University of Florida. And so he just took this
Yeah,
kid under his wing and just a great ambassador for beekeeping and education and scientific research. All of it. He's just a great.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so tell us, go ahead.
That kid actually spoke to I forget his name now, but he spoke. I was at the Iowa conference last month, and he spoke via Zoom. Gave a talk about hive beetles to that group, so I'm sure it was the same person you're
Is
talking
that
about.
a Atreya
Like
monasui?
a, huh?
Atreya monasui? That sound right?
No, it doesn't. He was 14 or 15-year old.
Yeah, he's a sophomore in high
Yeah,
school.
okay. Well, maybe it was.
Yeah, and he
Maybe it
lives in
was him then.
Florida. Yep, he was doing research on they were testing out different patties and stuff. Uh bee nutrition and of course small hive beetle
Okay.
repellents.
That would have been him then.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Very interesting. Got a bright future. He's also writing a book right now, by the way. So,
Good.
okay. So tell us one thing about yourself that you think people don't know. That's also interesting that people don't know.
Boy, I don't know. What else do I do? Well, I'm a home brewer. Um, I have been brewing beer for the last 10 years or so. Most of them have honey in them somewhere in the ingredients. So that's a lot of fun.
So you don't make mead? Most people would think you'd be making
I
mead.
do not, and I never made mead because it took too much honey for years. Now that I'm producing more honey, my house that I live in now, it's I don't have a basement, so mead needs to be um, stored, fermented for long periods of time in a cool place, and I can't just stick it in the back closet like I do beer for four weeks or something. So
So for those who are wondering, you have closets full of beer. Okay.
just one.
All right. Well, that's interesting. I'm really glad that you took time to share with everyone today and to accept my invitation for this interview. I think it's very interesting to get behind the scenes on what editors are doing, what the job is like. And I think you've been very generous with your time. We've been talking for over an hour now. So
All right.
any last
Yeah.
thoughts or anything you'd like to say on your way out?
No, I will just mention, we talked about subscribing to the magazines there. I just think, but
Hmm.
people need. I think it's important for people to get the printed word in front of them too, and it's more of a lasting thing. And I mentioned I've gotten both of these magazines for over a quarter of a century now. And when you think about it, if you get both ABJ and B Culture, we're talking around $60 a year. If
Mhm.
you bring one more colony through the winter or produce one more super of honey next summer, you're way ahead of the game.
Mhm.
And the nice thing about these magazines is you got this thing, especially if you're getting a hard copy, you got it sitting on a shelf. You can go, oh, what was
Mhm.
Megan saying about with how I split colonies last year? Let me go pull that out because
Mhm.
I'm confused about this and walk yourself through it. And it's just nice to have. And you can find the same thing on the internet too, but there's so much on the internet. I feel like we as magazine editors are forced to kind of pick between separate the wheat from the chaff for you. So there's
Mhm.
not quite as much bad stuff you have to sort through before you find that Frederick Dunn or somebody else who's out there that's got that YouTube channel that's more reliable. So
Mhm. Well,
that's
thank
my
you.
plug.
Thank you for saying that my channel is more reliable. And but so I need to backtrack a little bit. Is American Bee Journal searchable? Are the articles searchable like through the years?
We're not good at that. I'll just
Okay.
tell you right now. And this is one area, and well, I will say that bee culture is not great at that either. But this is one area where bee culture, the online presence, bee culture is ahead of us. And
Mhm.
we're a slow moving organization here, trying to bring us up into the 21st century is a slow deal.
Mhm.
Um, but we do have our mag our you can search a PDF, but
Mhm.
our magazines are out there now, from the time that we've gone digital for, I think since like 2010, maybe. I got them to put those magazines out there on our website. You cannot access anything within the past 12 months unless you're a subscriber, a digital
Okay.
subscriber. But beyond that, you can go back and you can find that 2014 ABJ and look at, if you want to look for Randy Allen's article out there, and you can download it a PDF, and then you can search, that as a PDF or a search function in it. We've
Yeah.
also got index in the back of the magazine, and
Mhm.
in the back of the December issue, there's an index you can flip through for on subject and find things.
Now, if you subscribe to the print version, are you automatically digitally subscribed as well, or are those separate things?
No, those are separate things.
Okay. How do they compare price wise?
The digital is $16. The print subscription is 32. If you get that 15% discount, I think I
Mhm.
don't know, 27 something. I'd have to do the math here, but
Okay. All right. I think you've answered all my questions for now.
all right. Well, I
Thank you.
appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I had a great time talking with you.
So there you have it from the editor of the American Bee Journal. Subscribe to both the American Bee Journal and Bee Culture. There's no such thing as knowing too much about bees and how to keep them. I subscribe to both and personally recommend that you do also. I'm Frederick Dunn, and I want to thank you for watching and listening to another episode of Interviews with Experts. I wish you all the best in beekeeping.